What up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Fast Trax Live. My name is Paul Abernathy. If you're not familiar with who I am the CEO and founder of Electrical Code Academy. And I am blessed to be here. I've been under the weather today, been pretty much sick all day. But again, the show must go on. Even broke out my old glasses. Because I can't see anything out of these new glasses. Well, they're about a year old, but the diabetes is really playing a toll on me, and it's affecting my vision. So I'm all over the place. So welcome to the live stream. This is a stream that's dedicated to our Fast Trax students. This is all for you. During the session, if you have a question in any of the units you're working in and you want us to look at it, we'll go look at it. Just let me know in the chat. And if you have a topic that you wanted me to discuss, you remember, you got to send that to me at least 24 hours ahead of time so I can put some slides together so that I can teach the masses. All right. So, but if it's one of the units you're working on and there's a certain question you don't understand and you've got your feedback and you're like, I still don't get it, then, all you got to do is let me know. We'll go in and look at it, and I'll do my best to explain it to you. Okay. All right. So first thing, as always, let me go over to the comments and kind of just welcome everybody into the room. Make sure you join in and you let us know where you're from. And I'd love to give you a shout out. Thanks for joining me, all my Fast Track students who are, I don't know if I should say students. Okay. So your peers, your equals in the industry. I'm a master electrician like everybody else, and I've been through the trade, have the scars to prove it, owned my own companies, successful, failures, everything. Okay, I know, and I just been there and done that. I want to remind you that we do have 3 podcasts that are coming out today. If you've never listened to my podcasts, there's about 800 episodes. You can go through it and find them. They're not really indexed well. I'm sorry. I'm just not into indexing things well. But we have 3 new episodes coming out. Episode 140 is about going into business for yourself and some of the things you need to be aware of and all that kind of stuff. And then episode 141, it's coming out either tonight or tomorrow on all of your favorite podcast listening platforms. All you got to do is search for Mastered the NEC podcast. All separate words. Master the NEC podcast. Whether it's Spotify, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast. I don't have an Apple device, but it seems like more people listen to me on Apple. And of course, I have an episode 141 that's coming out, which is about non-metallic sheath cable. And you actually might learn something in that episode. Okay, so that is definitely, don't think you're too good to ever learn something else about non-metallics, because it's the probably the most used wiring method in residential industry is non-metallic sheath cable. So I have an episode coming out on that, 141. It's about an hour long. So again, I will put you to sleep as I normally do. Swartzy will tell you. I'll knock him out quickly. And then, of course, episode 142. I was asked what my favorite change was to the 2023 edition of the National Electrical Code. So believe it or not, I elaborate pretty deep on what my favorite change was. And you might be surprised what my favorite change was to the entire 2023 edition of the National Electrical Code. All right, but with that, let's go and get to the chat, and so I can do some welcoming in. Again, I want to welcome in some folks here. Red Dog, thanks for joining me. Just got home. Kyle, Adam, thanks for joining me. Schwartzy, as always, is a rock. He's always there. Adam, people who escaped the Matrix. Pablo, Tampa, Florida, thanks for joining me. Justin, down in Houston, right down the road here, about 6 hours down into Houston. And Schwartzy says he's taking a nap on me already. He's already hit the clunked out. So welcome, folks. All right, so David P. Thank you, David. Thank you for joining me. Sean, California's in the house. Okay, all the way out on the West Coast. Okay, Tony Green's there. Welcome, Tony. Thanks for joining me. Again, great to see all of you here. Jesse, I always know Jesse's going to be there. Jesse's there. So again, thank you all for joining me and being part of it. All right, so let me Eric, I see Eric. Eric's always there. Welcome, Eric. Thanks for joining me again. Red Dog is in East Los Angeles, born and raised out there on the West Coast. All right, folks, so y'all know how it goes. Many people that get our Fast Trax program, or those out there that are interested in it, I'm going to have to ask you folks that are in our program to indulge me as I kind of show people what the program is a little bit before we dig in, because again, the program is not the easiest in the world for people, and some people do struggle in the program. Kyle down in Atlanta, representing Georgia. So we like to give a little bit of a tidbit of what the program's all about and how you get our stuff. So again, indulge me in my commercial beginning, folks. Hopefully I don't turn anybody off and you leave. It's just, I'm in business, just like you're in business. And so I have to put the promotion hat on. I'm not a salesman. I try not to be. But y'all do know that we used to do the Wednesday night sessions, which were closed, right? They were on Zoom. And you could ask your questions. Well, you can still do this now, students or members of our program. If you have Ryan's with us. Ryan's a new member to the Fast Trax program. Ryan, did you plan that, Ryan? Ryan's, check that out. How do you figure that one now? Justin, what is this? Justin says, I'm the guy that was doing the Sparky's cage races. Hoping to get the back up and going soon. Yep, cool deal. So, hey, look, you can still ask if you're working in any of our units right now, and you want me to go look at it. Just post it. Make sure you let me know which edition you're in: 2017, 2020, 2023, whatever you're in. Let me know the unit and let me know the question. And if it's really one you want us to go look at, we'll go look at. And again, you might have to wait around as I get through what I'm going to go over today, which today might be a long one. And indulge me tonight because I am a little under the weather. But again, the show must always go on, and I have a mission to teach, and I'm going to keep teaching come hell or high water. Yeah, Eric, set up the training schedule for yourself. David, thanks for liking the stream. Again, always likes, subscribes. They all show up on the screen right here. So again, those out there that might stumble upon the stream, welcome to the excitement. I will tell you what is a little different about me when it comes to me and other educators. I'm approachable. Now, sometimes my emails might be short, quick, to the point. Hopefully I don't offend anybody. I am certainly not trying to. Justin, thank you for liking the stream. It's just that I have to answer hundreds and hundreds of questions a week, and I'm doing my best to answer that type of thing. Schwartzy's in the house. Schwartzy, also very trusted source. You want to post any questions in here tonight, Schwartzy will obviously help me out. And I know you're there to help me all the time, Schwartzy, and we want to try to integrate you more. I just have to think of a way to reward you for all your efforts because I'm working on that. James, thanks for the like in the stream. Okay, so with that said, Fast Trax people that are involved in it, post your unit, your question, and I'll go to it. You don't have to, all you got to do is tell me where to go, and I'll go look at it. Well, we're going to do an episode tonight. We're actually going to do one of the hardest units in the Fast Trax program. is Unit 8. Unit 8 is about one family dwellings, single family dwellings, and it might seem extremely easy. Everybody feels like that oh, well, I don't need to worry about load calculations for dwellings. And, we do this all the time. We'll look at a house and go, dude, I'm not doing that calculation. That's 200 amp, or that's a 400 amp, or whatnot. But I'm here to tell you, whether you choose to do it or not, part of being an electrician is that you know how to do it, right? So we want to make sure a brain surgeon doesn't do brain surgery every day. Well, maybe a brain surgeon does do it every day. Jesse, thank you, brother. I appreciate the like for the stream. But, you might have a general practitioner who doesn't see the same thing all the time. And so he kind of gets, out of sync and whatnot. So he's got to constantly be learning and taking training and refreshing their knowledge. Same thing with us as electricians. Always got to be refreshing that knowledge. So some things you might forget, but we're going to go over Unit 8's. We're going to do questions 13, and I can't remember. It's 13 through 21 in today's lesson. And if you've been struggling with Unit 8, this is going to be great for you because this kind of shows you the process of how we would do a calculation. Okay. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Let's try to keep them germane to the topic tonight, unless you're asking a question about a unit that you're working on. That's why this is just like the Wednesday nights. It's just very concise and it allows me to manage it a little bit better. You know what I'm saying? Okay, and bear with me. I'm a redundant educator. Okay, I go over things over and over again. Ted Buck is in the house. Over on, what is that? LinkedIn. Something to add to your Wednesday night class session would be hazardous location sessions. Remember, this is Fast Trax Live. So this is for Fast Trax students. So this is not really for me to educate the masses. This is for Fast Trax student questions. So I'm probably not going to do a whole lot of lessons dedicated to hazardous locations and get very deep because it is covered in the Fast Trax. But I appreciate it, that type of thing. We can have some little segments on it, but usually the Wednesday nights is for you to bring questions for any of the units you're working on. And, I might do a little lesson, but I'm probably not going to get overly deep in hazardous locations, okay? Now, maybe some other videos that I'm doing for the Fast Trax Tube, I will be getting into a little bit more of the hazardous location applications, Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, Division 1, Division 2, and all that kind of stuff. So Ted Buck, make sure you wait for that because we will be doing that. But probably not going to go too deep on a Wednesday night, but I'll try to put something together for you, at least to give you a taste of some hazardous location stuff here. Okay, sound good? Ben Yu, good evening from Detroit, Michigan. Thank you. And again, Ted, thanks for joining. Okay. So make sure you check out these 3 podcasts. Definitely that I told you about earlier. Make sure you go check those out. And again, Ted, I will definitely try to incorporate something with hazardous locations in the future. Absolutely. Okay. First of all, what I want to do real quick is for those that are not familiar, what the hell is wrong with this mouse? It's always something. I want to show those that aren't familiar, just indulge me. If you decide to leave and click off because I bore you, I get it, I understand. But what I want to do is I want to show the website really quickly and say some things out there to folks who might be interested in our courses but are very confused, okay? I just got to do this. So this is our website, okay? This is fasttracksystem.com. You can now, and this might look different if you're on a mobile app. It's going to be a little bit consolidated for you. But this is where you get to our blogs. This is where you get to all of our information, our events, our courses, our mobile app. Right here, try to get it on your phone. If you don't have our mobile app yet on your phone, I don't know what the hell you're waiting for. There's so many free resources. We don't use that Wix stuff anymore. So get rid of the Wix. Only use our app that we have. So you can get there from here. This is how you register. This is how you log in. But I got to tell you something up first. This is something that I've been wanting to tell students and people that buy our courses for a long time. When you buy our Fast Trax program, you have to wait up to 5 business days to get your keys. This is not an instant access course. You can't just buy it and then log in and start studying. Okay? The Fast Trax Black, the Fast Trax Plus, and all the residential, commercial, industrial, we have to generate keys for you because you get your own login on your own console. And so we have to put that in place. So it can take up to 5 days. Now, I don't know that it's ever really taken 5 days, but it could, okay, depending on the workload, the caseload. But I want you to remember that. So buying our course, do not think that you get instant log access. Now, we do have budget courses available, which is the exact same information as in our course. It's just you don't get the support from me. Okay, you don't get the one-on-one or answering your questions. You can go to the Sparky Hub and post your questions, but we do know who buys a budget, and I don't give you the same type of support that I would give a Fast Trax Black or Fast Trax Plus. Oscar, thank you for the like of the stream. Also, welcome to the stream. I see you there, and you popped in there. Welcome. But the budget's a good opportunity for you, but that one you can log straight in. Okay, but it is it's about half the price of the normal program, but it still gives you all the information. Okay, and we do not have payment plans. Sorry, and I'm not into payment plans. It's electricians investing in their future. I get it. It's a chunk, but there are other programs out there that don't do near what we do, and they want $1,000, $800, $1,200 for a DVD set. We're pretty affordable, but no, I don't. Now you know what, Dwayne? There is a payment plan, not through me. If you purchase with PayPal, I think they'll let you break it into 4 payments or something. So that's an option for you. PayPal, when you go to checkout, they have that option for like a pay now, pay later option plan. I don't offer one, but PayPal offers one. So there you go. PayPal has an alternative for that. And we do accept PayPal, and it's already integrated into our system. So give that a shot. And that's probably the best way. It'll break it down in like 4 payments or something like that. Now, when you look at our course, all of the programs are right here on the front, by the way. But you can go under courses and you see we have the exam prep stuff, continuing education. We have a partnership for that. We have the budget courses. We have a bunch of free stuff as well that you can play around with. Like if you click this budget here, then you'll also see over here that we have all these budget courses that you can have. But if you go to the free, you'll also see that we have the electrical exam prep primer. That's free. We have the boxes enclosure. That's free. That type of thing. Thanks, Eric. It's been a long time since I've had one of those super chat things. Appreciate you. But again, we have a little bit of everything over here. One of the biggest things that I like is the blogs. We have some great blogs up here, folks. And there's dozens of blogs on all different types of topics. Yes, some of them are marketing. I get it. But there are a lot of other things on here. How to do certain types of calculations or whatnot. So anyway, that's the end of that. I just wanted you all to kind of be aware that we do offer a bunch of different resources on our website. So we're not a one-trick pony. We're just not trying to sell you courses. We have a bunch of stuff. Now, if you get our mobile app, all you got to do is go to the mobile app, and it's right here. If you're on your phone, go to this and just click on this link right here. If you're on your desktop, just scan this QR code and put that app on your phone. You're going to be surprised at all of the features that are in our app. Okay. All right. Enough of that. Okay. So I don't see any additional questions so far. I do see the super chat, Eric. Thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. Let's get into tonight's topic, okay? So we're going to go on and jump into the lesson. Now, if you've already been through this lesson, think about it. There you go on the stream. Donated. Eric, thank you, brother. I appreciate you. You're going to need, when you study with me, you're going to need scratch paper. You're going to need your code book. You're going to need this type of stuff. All right? So, Jorge, I think that's how you say it. Jorge, subscribe. Thank you, Jorge. Appreciate the subscription. Hopefully you get something out of this channel. All right? Okay. Let's go on into the lesson. Okay. Now, this may be hard for you to see. I don't know. I don't know what you're watching on. The best I can do and still be able to get everything onto the screen. So I'm going to do like I always do. I'm going to regurgitate it for you. It's my redundant style of teaching. You know what I was going to say earlier? My teaching style is a little different than a lot of educators. I just don't give you questions, right? And just give you the answer. I got to show you how to get there. So that means I'm long-winded. Some people like that. Some people don't. Some people give me a thumbs down. That's okay. But you know, at the end of the day, I is what I is, and it's how I teach, and I don't change for nobody. So let's just do it. Oh, you talk too much, Paul. Whatever. Plenty of other channels to watch. You know what I'm saying? All right. So let's look at what we've got here. So what we've got is a dwelling. And this dwelling is a 120/240 volt, 3-wire, single phase, one family dwelling. Simple, easy peasy. Should have no problem going through this tonight, right? And we've got all these elements that are involved. We've got the floor area in our question. Looks like it's 2,500 square feet. We have a range that's 12 kW. We have a water heater that's 4 kW. Okay. We have a dishwasher that's 1.5 kW. Okay, so I'm regurgitating this to you folks. We have an in-sink waste disposer. It looks like that's a 3rd horsepower. It's 115 volts. Remember, here's a tip, folks. Use what they give you in the question. Don't try to bring common sense into it and say, well, isn't that 120? Because it's a 120/240 volt system. No, use what they give you. 115 volt in-sink waste disposer, garbage disposer. Next thing we got is a electric clothes dryer, 4 kW. Sounds like a small clothes dryer, but there you go. 4 kW clothes dryer. Then we have electric heat. We have 2 banks of 3 kW heat. Okay. And we have an air handler. Also, it's 3 kW, so it's 6 overall. What's up, Richard? Thanks for joining me. Hopefully you got my response to your email because I did respond back to it. Let's see. We have air handler, which is the blower motor for the air handler. So obviously that's moving the air through the dwelling, right? Then we have air conditioner compressor. Okay, so that's the unit outside. And that is, so the air handler was a 1/4 horsepower, by the way. The air conditioning compressor is 5 horsepower. Okay, and that's 230 volts. And then, of course, the condensing fan motor is, I believe, 1/6 of a horsepower and 115 volts. So that's what we've got. So, you know, in the Fast Trax program, we have little forms that you print out. And you follow the forms, it works you through the steps, right? Kind of talks you through what you need to know. So one of the things that people ask me all the time about a question like this on an exam, they say, Paul, if I get this question, if I were to get an exam question like this that has all, and you might, a lot of the states are changing now where they'll give you the scenario at the top and then they will ask you a bunch of questions based on the scenario. And that's what they're starting to do a lot in Texas for the masters and things like that. So get used to it. And it's really an effective way to ask a question because it lets me just put all the info out there and then you just got to answer the questions. Now, in order for us to answer these questions, now 13, 14, 15, and 16, as you can see on your screen, hopefully you can see. I can barely see it, so hopefully you can see it, but I'll read it to you, don't worry. To answer these questions, I just can't look at this and answer it. I'm going to have to do the math to be able to answer it, okay? Now, this first one wanting us to do this use the standard method, which is predominantly what you're going to see on an electrical exam, folks. It's really what you're going to see. And there's a reason why I do these kind of calculations a lot for people, single family dwelling, because we're still having students going through it. Maybe not you folks that are in the system and done it a couple of times. And once you get used to it, you realize, like Michael will tell you, Once you've done it a couple times and you get fluid in it, it becomes just simply old hat. And I like it that way. I like you to get so confident in it. But there are a lot of students, and lately when I'm doing the reviewing and the grading, there's a lot of students that are still struggling with something like this, and I want to make sure we explain how to do this. Okay, so first thing that I look at, and I always love doing these anyway, as I go, okay, well, where do we have to go and what does the code say? Well, first thing we have to look at is, let's start with the floor area. So that floor area is 2,500 square feet. So in the National Electrical Code, we logically start out and say, well, how do I deal with this floor area? Okay, so with that said, we're going to go to the code. Okay, get me over to the code real quick. All right, here we are. We're in 220. Now, if you look at how this lays out, you're going to see that, and I'm going to give you a kind of a spoiler alert. One of my podcasts today explains why, and I'm going to spoil it right now. I think that the restructuring of Article 220 in the 2023 edition of the National Electrical Code is genius. It is a better flow. Everything that they did, and it's a reason why we change the code every 3 years. Maybe it's just to reorganize things or make things flow a little better. The 2020, they did it. That code panel made Article 220 flow so much better for the 2023 edition. Flowed so much better, okay? So that is actually, spoiler alert, that is my favorite change to the 2023 edition of the National Electrical Code is the restructuring of Article 220. Because as an educator, it just makes sense. I have to teach those things. All right, so let's start out. So the first thing that we're going to do in this calculation, let me give you something else that people ask me. You know what? This is my show. I do what I want, right? Hey, Edgar, welcome to the stream. I do things kind of out of the ordinary sometimes, and you just got to hang with me. I don't always follow the time frame. I don't always stick to an hour. People come and go. People get bored and leave. I get it. But I wanted to talk about something. Every time I get students will ask me a question, when do I round? If it's 0.4 or less, or when it's 0.5 or greater, why do I round? When you're using the Fast Trax program, folks, this is what can be most frustrating with people, is we don't round, okay, kilowatts. We round amperage. So if my question only wants the answer in kilowatts, for example, then there is no rounding. You just give the answer in kilowatts. Now, when you look at the code, the rounding that we talk about in 220.5, right? And let me make sure all right, look, I'm looking at the 2023 edition. Hold on. Let me go on and get back to the 2020 since our unit's in the 2020. I want to make sure that I stay in the right unit, folks. I don't want to go into 2023 and everybody questions, So here we are. We're in the 2020 edition. All right. Now, right here, fractions of amps. This rule is for amps. It's not for kilowatts. Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, when you resolve it down to amps, you will be able to do rounding if you want. But if we're asking you a question and we simply want the kilowatts, don't do any rounding when it comes to 0.5 because that only applies to amps. It doesn't apply to kilowatts. You know what I'm saying? So again, kind of a little tip for those that are working on their units and they want to do all this rounding. Another tip, you don't round. When I ask you a question that wants to know what the neutral contribution is, and like you're trying to solve what's the neutral contribution of an electric range, for example, and you know that 220.61 is Ryan. I'm hard to believe y'all are in the 2023 already. I didn't think any state adopted 2023 yet. So that's interesting. I didn't think anybody actually adopted it yet, but it is now, what is this, August, so could be. And hey, I wish all states would jump to the 2023, but that's just me. So July 17th, wow, there you go. Bravo for that, absolutely. I'm a big fan of those states that jump right to that 2023. But anyway, let's talk about the fraction of an amp here. When we're doing a neutral contribution and we kind of know, let's say, what the ranges are, Minnesota also did it in July. Oh, God, I got to have a clap button for that. Where the hell is it? Where the hell's my clap button? Congratulations. I wish the more states would just get on board and just immediately, once it's adopted, give it a little time frame, maybe 6 months, and then go to the latest edition of the code. Life would be so much easier for me. Anyway, so if I ask you what the neutral contribution was of a range, or let's say it was is 8 kW, right? For the range, let's say that's what it was. Then 220.61 allows me to take 70% of that. So 8,000 times 70% is 5,600. That's the neutral contribution, okay? So, you wouldn't round anything. You wouldn't, if your values, you were working them, for example, in kW, this would be 56,000, but it would be 5.6 kW, for example, and it's the neutral contribution. I don't want you to round this up to 6. The actual contribution of the neutral is what you calculate. There is no rounding there, okay? No rounding there. Now, if I'm working on grounded conductors, hot conductors, sizing conductors, doing all that, I'm working in amps, then obviously this rule will apply and you can round it 0.5 or greater, you round up. Anything under 0.5, such as 0.4 or less, then you can drop off, okay? But remember, it only applies to amps. All right, so in our work that we're working on here, and I'll also tell you this, whether you're in the 2023 or the 2020, there was really no substance change in Article 220. It just was moving things around to be a more logical flow. So while I'm using the 2020 here tonight, it didn't really change anything significant in 2023. It's just the restructuring, which meant the world to me. Okay, that new way of putting things in logical flow makes a difference to the electrician studying for things. Okay, that's the only difference. Okay, all right. So 220.11, which is your floor area. So in this case, our question was the floor area was 2,500 square feet. We measure it from the outside dimensions. So that was already given to us in the question. So it's 2,500. Okay. So now where do we go to start that journey for the calculation? Okay. For where do we get our square footage? So right here, since we're talking about a dwelling unit, right here, we're in J. Okay. Dealing with dwelling unit. It says 1 family, 2 family, and multifamily dwellings. Well, we have a 1 family, so we're good. It says the minimum unit load shall not be less than 3 VA per square foot. And it also reminds us that the lighting and the general use receptacle loads are all covered under 220.14 J1, J2, and J3. Okay? And this is included in that minimum unit load, right? No additional load calculation shall be required for those outlets. This is important because one of the questions in our Fast Trax program talks about an unfinished basement that gets finished later, and we ask you what contribution does it add to the service, and people always want to take that square footage and add 3 VA per square foot. Now, that square footage should already be factored into the 3 VA per square foot. So you're going to do the dimensions. So if I have a rancher that's sitting on an unfinished basement, the basement's unfinished. When you size that service and you're using the 3 VA per square foot, you're going to be counting the outside dimensions of the first floor, and you're also going to be counting the outside dimensions of the basement because it is adaptable for future use. Obviously, somebody could come along and finish it off. So you already have to take that into consideration when you're sizing the service. Okay. Now in our question, our example, it just gave us the overall floor area was 2,500 square feet. So there is no basement. We just know there's 2,500 square feet. So the first thing that you want to remember is this also covers all of the general use receptacles, 20 amps or less. So this covers the bedroom receptacles, living room receptacles, basement receptacles, all of those. Now, it does not cover the small appliances, does not cover the laundry, but it covers generally everything else that falls under that scope of general use, okay? It also covers your lighting outlets that you would have, whether it's the lighting outlets in your room, in a hallway, stairway, all of that stuff is covered as well, right? So again, the receptacles in your garage, they're covered. Attached garage, by the way, they're covered. Any receptacles you'd have in the front or the back of your dwelling are covered. All of that's covered in the 3 VA per square foot. Nothing else you have to do for that, okay? So the first thing that we're going to write down, because we've got our pen and paper handy, is we knew that it was 2,500 square feet. That's what it was for the building. And so it's 3 VA per square foot. So we're going to take care of this right away. We're just going to go 3 times 2,500. So 3 times 2,500. Right? That's 7,500 VA. So you write that down. Okay? That's your square footage for the general use and your lighting. Make sense? Okay. That's the first thing you do. Okay, now, the next question we'll go back to, and that's where we got that from, right there, 220.14J. All right, so the next question you got to ask yourself, all right, well, it doesn't say anything about small appliance. It doesn't say anything about laundry. But these are required branch circuits. So 210.11C1 and C2 talk about the required branch circuits. And then 220.52 talks about what their VA is. So we know that we have to have at least 2 small appliance branch circuits, right? That's required in 210.11C1. And we have to have at least 1 laundry circuit. That's 210.11C2. Okay? So we have to have those. Now, what is the VA for those? Okay, well, we'll go back to the code. So we're back here at the code, and we're going to go and find out what the VA is for those. So that's going to take us down to 220.52 right here. And it's going to tell me that small appliance, it needs to be, Richie, thank you for liking the stream. I appreciate you. Thank you. It says that shall be calculated at 1,500 VA for each 2-wire small appliance branch circuit covered by 210.11C1. So you have to have at least 2. Now, what happens if you have more than 2? It's still 1,500 VA for each additional, okay? So, but you got to have at least 2. Now, since our question did not state more than 2, and we know that we have to have at least 2, so that we have to have 1,500 VA times 2, because a minimum of 2, okay? You just have to know that. If they ask you for a service load calculation, if they ask you for this calculation, there's no way that you can calculate it otherwise unless you incorporate the small appliance. So to that 7,500, I'm going to do a second line. I'm going to write 3,000, which is 1,500 VA times 2. That's my minimum of 2 small appliances. Again, remember, if you have more than 2 in the real world, you're going to have to add 1,500 for each additional one that you have. Okay? So the next thing that I'm going to look at is, well, while I'm already here, here's that laundry that's required by 210.11C2. And it says the load for that is also 1,500 VA, right? And we know that you have to have at least 1. But like I said, if I have more than 1, you got a nice size house, you got 2 separate laundries, then guess what? Then you're going to have 1,500 VA each. Okay, remember, this has nothing to do with the clothes dryer. It might be in a laundry room, but that's not the laundry circuit we're talking about. Okay. All right, so in this case, I'll just put 1,500 because it didn't say anything otherwise, and we know we have to have at least 1. So that's why we're going to take the 1,500. All right. So now we're done with that part. The next step would be moving into the appliances, and we'll take care of those. But we have something that we have to do now. We get to apply some demand factors because of diversity in this dwelling. And obviously not all of these receptacles are going to be used at the same time. So we get the luxury of having some diversity placed on that. Now you might ask me, where is it in the code that tells me that when I'm doing that 3 VA per square foot, where is it that also allows me to lump in that laundry and lump in that small appliance when I'm applying 220.42? Well, it says it right here. right here in the small appliance at the end, it allows me to apply the demand factors of table 220.42. And it says it right here for the laundry as well. So that's why we get to take that 7,500 for the 3 VA per square foot times the square footage and then lump it in with the small appliance and the laundry and apply the demand factors of table 220.42. That's where you get that permission to do that. If you've ever wondered how I get there, that's how you get there. You're allowed to add that in. All right, so with that said, we're going to apply those demand factors now so we can move on to the appliances, move pretty quickly on that. So let's go to 220.42 and I will jump back at it right here. So here's your table. This says general lighting, but you remember that with the 3 VA per square foot, the whole rule was that we could lump them together. So it just kind of all falls under that dwelling unit in there. So don't let the thing that says general lighting throw you, because the 3 VA per square foot incorporates those general use receptacles into that overall general lighting equation. Okay, so don't let that fool you. In fact, I have some students that actually right there next to where it says general lighting, they'll put in parentheses and they'll write includes receptacle loads in dwellings or general purpose, etc. Again, be careful what state you're in. Some let you write in a code book, some won't let you write in a code book. Okay, so just make sure you know where you're at when you're doing that. All right, so this table is very familiar with everybody. We're going to be working under the dwelling unit right here. And basically it says the first 3,000, you just take it at 100%, which is equal to what? 3,000. That's pretty straightforward. And then from 3,001 up to 120,000, or as I like to say, once you get to 3,000, the next 117,000. Okay, so if your values, after that 3,000, if the remaining value you have is not over 117,000, then you can take that value and apply 35% demand factor to it. Okay, so in our case, obviously we're nowhere near it. And again, if you had a really, really large dwelling, then you could apply the value that's over 120. You could apply 25%. So when you hear somebody like me say the next 17,000, remember 117 and 3,000 is 120. It's just a shortcut way of me saying take the first 3,000 at 100, take the next 117,000, which is at 301 through 120, take the next 117,000 at 35%. And anything over that, take it at 25%. Just an easier way to remember things, okay? And remember, we're logically going through each little piece of this. All right, so I'm going to apply some demand factors to that general lighting and general use receptacle applications, small appliance, and laundry. So I'm going to add all three of those up. What did we have? We had 7,500, we had 3,000, and we had 1,500. And at any point, any of you are confused where we got those numbers, just like when we did old Wednesday nights, make sure you put it in the comments. I will go back and rehash anything. Remember, this is for you. I give of this time for you. And this was a more economical way to be able to do that and get your questions answered, okay, than it was in the Zoom. At least that's what the board of directors believed. So, all right, so that's 12,000. All right, and I'll also promise you, even with only 26 people in the room, I don't have real popular videos anymore. People don't like to watch my videos. But that's still more than we would have on the Wednesday night sessions. So obviously, it's more of a success than it was before. All right, so 12,000. Now, what do we do? What did we say? What does it say right here? All right, so the first 3,000 is at 100%. So I'm going to take that 12,000. I'm going to subtract 3 away from it. I'm going to put that 3 aside because we're going to use that later. So I take 12,000 minus 3,000. That is 9,000. Well, that 9,000 is the value that's up to 117,000, and obviously it's nowhere close. So we're going to be able to use 35% on that 9,000. So I've got the 3,000 at 100%, and I got the remaining 9,000, and I'm going to multiply that by 35%. That is 3,150. Okay, so I'm going to write that down. All right, so what am I going to do? I'm going to take the original 3,000, which is 100%, and now I'm going to add that 3,150 to it. And always double check your math. So 12,000 minus 3,000 equals 9,000 times 35%. Again, 3,150. Add back to 3,000, which was at 100, at 6,150. Okay, so 6150 is our general use, general lighting value, calculated load, not connected. That would be our calculated load because we did a calculation. Okay, I also have to explain that from time to time to folks, the difference between connected load and calculated load. Connected load, you're adding everything up. That's the full face value of the connected load. The calculated load means you've done something. You've done a calculation. You have done some type of modification to the original value. So when you read a question, be real careful when you see something that says connected load or calculated load. Think of calculated means I had to do something. I had to equate something, that type of thing. Okay. All right, that's 6150. All right, so that's our general use and general receptacle, general lighting load, okay, in our equation for our service. Done. Okay, next, let's move on to the question. Let's go on to the next thing. All right, let's talk about the appliances real quick. Let's go on and knock appliances out of the way since we're here. I'm going to go on and let me get down to where I need to be. All right, so here's what we need. Appliances, 220.53. And this does flow in an order, folks. 53 is appliances, 54 is ranges, 54 is dryers, 55 is ranges. So it does have a bit of a flow. Once you do it one time, you'll be very good at it. So what do we have for appliances, folks? Okay, let's look here. We've got a water heater. Okay, that's 4,000. Okay. We have a dishwasher that is 1.5. So we know that we're gonna take that, and I like to break everything out and get it out into VA. And so we have 4,000 watts or VA for the water heater. We have 1,500 watts of VA for the dishwasher. We have an in-sink waste disposer, and this is a 3rd horsepower at 115 volts. So we're gonna have to go look that up. Y'all already know where it's at. Do me a favor, Mike, go look that up for me if you're still on here. And we all know where you go, right? Single phase, we're going to go to 430.248, and we're going to be looking under the 115 column, and we're going to be looking at the 3rd horsepower in order to find out what the FLC is. Okay, so we need to do that. And so that's the only appliances we have. We have an in-sink waste disposer, we have a dishwasher, and we have a water heater. Okay. And Schwartzy looked it up for us, and it was 7.2 amperes for that 3rd horsepower. And for all of you out there who knows how Schwartzy did that, I'm not going to look it up, but I will show you. You simply go down here to 430 for motors, okay, right there. And you go all the way to the end for the tables. If you have your code book, 248, 249, 250, you go down there to the tables right there. And then once you get to these tables, you're going to be looking for, okay, here's 430.258 right here. And you're going to go under the voltage, and you're going to go find the horsepower of the motor, and that's how you're going to find it. So Schwartzy got us there, 7.2 amps. That is your FLC, okay? Not the same as what's on the nameplate. Okay, there's a lot of factors that go into nameplate, reactants, and all kinds of stuff that get figured in for nameplates. This is the FLC. This is where you go for consistency in the back of Article 430 in order to find that information. So in case you wondered that, that's exactly where you go for that. Let me get back where I was. Okay, so here's where we're back where we are. Okay, now, so what Schwartzy did is he told us it's 7.2 amps. So obviously we have to get this into a value that we can work with, a VA. So what do we use? We use good old Ohm's law. We use the studies that we're used to doing, and we do 7.2 times 115. That is 828 VA, right? And remember, you're going to use the voltage they give you in the question. Do not make the mistake and use 120. Use what they give you, okay? Because whoever already gave this to you already knows the answer, and so they're asking you a certain way. So make sure you follow what they're doing. All right, so that is 828. Schwartzy's got it on the screen there for you in case you see it on the screen. That's how we convert things into VA. Once we know the amps and we know the volts, easy peasy, we can get a VA value. Now, let's look at 220.53 real quick. Here's what it says. It shall be permissible, so it's a permissive rule, to apply a demand factor of 75% to the nameplate rating load of 4 or more appliances rated a quarter horsepower or greater. So quarter or greater, or something that might be 500 watts or greater, that are fastened in place and that are served by the same feeder or service in the dwelling. So obviously this is our service, so it's servicing and feeding all that. Everything that we have in our example, we're looking at and go, okay, well, you're probably thinking, well, yes, a third is greater than a quarter. So all of it applies here. All of these are fastened in place. The dishwasher's fastened in place. Water heater's fastened in place. All of those are over 500 watts anyway. And the in-sink waste disposer is most certainly fastened in place. Even if it was cord and plug connected, guess what? It's still fastened in place. Okay? The actual garbage disposer itself. All right, so all of these apply. Now, here's the thing. I don't have, 4 or more. So I don't get to apply the demand factor of 75%. I just have to take their full value and run with it. And that's going to be my appliance contribution. It just is what it is. So what do we got? Well, we've got 4,000 for the water heater. Let me go back to the question so y'all can see it as we know what we're doing now. I got 4,000 for the water heater. I got 1,500 for the dishwasher. And I got 828 for the in-sink waste disposer. Add all those up and guess what? That's your appliance loads. So I'm going to 828 plus 4,000 plus 1,500. That's 6,328. So I'm going to write that down. So that's the next big one after what we did for the general use and general lighting. The next big one is 6,328. So 6,328. Okay. So I want to make sure that I add all that out. Okay. Makes sense? All right. Guess what? 2 down. Boom. Easy. Now we move on next. Logically, let's just go on to the clothes dryer. Right here. Let me go back to the question. It is we haven't done the range yet. That's right. That's next. We've done the clothes dryer. And remember, it said it's a 4 kW clothes dryer. Now, here's something to remember. We're doing a standard method. Now, granted, nothing says standard in the NEC. You just have part 3, and then you have optional. When we call it a standard method, it's just the given method. It's the method that's the primary method within the NEC. You get an option to use an optional. And I'm going to tell you, if you get a chance to always use the optional in the field, use it, right? But when it comes to one-family dwellings, you still have to know how to do this standard method because you still need to know how to size a neutral, okay? And you've got to use the standard for neutral sizing, okay? Interesting, 220.61 for neutrals. It's actually under part 3. It's not under part 4. So that's when people ask me why I can't, what am I doing? It's because there is no method for neutral sizing under part 4. There is under part 3. Okay. So you got to know how to do both in order to be successful in the field. All right. So let's look at this dryer. Let's say, so do we use that 4,000? No, absolutely not. You know that there's something in 220.54 that's different. So we'll go back to the code. And here's what it says for the clothes dryer. And again, we're talking dwelling units. It says the load for a household electric clothes dryer in a dwelling unit shall be either 5,000 watts or 5,000 VA. Okay, they're synonymous. Or the nameplate rating, whichever is larger, for each dryer served. Well, we only have one dryer. So it's 100%, no demand factors for that. But it can't be less than 5,000. So even though our clothes dryer is 4,000, you ignore the 4,000. It has to be 5,000. Okay, so that's the next one. You just write it down. So the clothes dryer is 5,000. Okay. Easy peasy, right? All right. Next, let's go back to our lesson. All right, so the next one in the lesson is, let's go on and tackle this range real quick. Let's get that over with, this range. So this is a 12 kW range. All right, so do you use 12 kW? Well, you could, and it's going to result in a service that's a little bit larger than necessary. And we're always trying to resolve for the best possible answer, the lowest possible answer, okay? So I'm going to go to 220.55. You see how this is flowing? We did the beginning, then we went to 220.53, then we went to 54, then we went to 55. There are some people out there that actually put little numbers beside each one of these to kind of be little step process. And again, if you can write in your code book and your state allows you to put markings in it, then if that helps you through the process, then hey, I'm all for that. There are other people that actually use those little peel and stick little dots, and they put little dots there. They use red for residential, green for other than dwelling, and they'll follow the dots. Okay, because it really doesn't matter what order you go in, as long as you cover them all. It doesn't really matter too much. All right, so let's go to ranges real quick. Okay. So here we are in ranges. So this is 220.55. We're going to read this as well. It says for electric cooking appliances in dwelling units and, of course, household cooking appliances used in instructional programs like a home ec or something in a school. I went to home ec when I was in school, believe it or not. I took one of my courses was home ec, and it's not because I wanted to be a good cook, because I can't cook for crap. But some of the girls that were in that, they were cute, so that was a bonus. But they could cook pretty good, and they always needed somebody to taste the food. That was me. I was more than happy to taste it, and I got a credit for it. You bet your butt. I'm there. So anyway, institutional programs, then you can use this application for that as well. And then no smart comments about my belly. And I had that long before, I was slim at one time in my life, folks. When I was crawling through attics and in crawl spaces, I wasn't that hefty. All right, so no comment, Mike. All right, it says the load for a household electric range, wall-mounted oven, counter-mounted cooking unit, and other household cooking appliances individually rated in excess of 1 3/4, so 1715 watts. So it has to be in excess of that, right? So anything that would be 1750 watts or 1 3/4 kilowatts or less, that's still an application that you have to take that load into consideration. And that typically would fall under 220.14a, I believe, where it says a specific load. So you're still going to account for the load. You just don't get to use it in this table. Okay, that's all it's saying. But if it is over 1 3/4, right, then you're permitted to use this table. And this table is based on some demand factors. Now, this table has 4 columns. The column on the left deals with the number of appliances. No biggie for us because it's a one-family dwelling, so we only got one. But that's the number of dwellings. And if you haven't watched my videos for ranges, it is over in the Fast Trax tube. Yes, you have to be a subscriber, but it's well worth the investment to get a year subscription to all of those videos. And we have so many more coming. We have couple hundred there now, and we're constantly vetting those out. And now, since we have become one team member less here than we used to be, I now have picked up that slack in vetting videos that are important to add to Fast Trax 2. Okay, so anybody out there wants to volunteer in submitting great videos from YouTube or whatever like that, and have us review them, save us a lot of time, we'd love to have it. And if they're worthy, we will actually add them to Fast Trax 2, that type of thing. Okay. Mike says, all 6 foot, 250 pounds of me has no comment. That's right, Mike. Ye who live in glass houses don't like to cast stones. That's for sure. All right. So this is a table. Y'all have all seen it before. Couple interesting things about this table real quick. And you know how I am. I'm not like other educators. I don't just put questions on the screen and give you answers. I'm an educator. Whether you like me or not, whether I'm long-winded, I can't help it. This is my world. Everybody else is just living in it. So I'm going to tell you what I need to tell you. When you're doing this table, you're always going to use column C. Okay, and then if you're using column C, it means you're also going to use the notes that are under this table. Okay, and there's quite a few notes. Now, if you happen to have what's called note C in play, that means you have actually ranges, cooking equipment, whatever, that falls less than, let's say it's anywhere between 8 3/4 down to 1 3/4, then you may be able to use column A or column B in lieu of column C. But in all other cases, you're always going to use column C. And you know what? Even if you get to use column A or column B, you still have to always compare it to column C. Because it tells you right here, it says column C to be used in all cases, except as otherwise permitted in note 3. Well, note 3 is specific that says, look, if you happen to have some that are cooking appliances that are over 1 3/4 through 8 3/4, well, we'll let you use column A or column B in lieu of column C, but at the end of the day, you still have to compare it to column C. And here's something unique about 220.55, folks. Are you ready? You get to take whichever one is the lesser of the two. Now, remember when we did the other stuff with the dryers, you have to take the larger nameplate or 5,000. This is unique with dryers. With ranges. You get to take whatever results in the lower value. How about that? Okay. So you're going to compare A and B, and you're going to compare it to C. Okay. Now, I'm not getting into that deep tonight because that would drive us away from our example, because our example was only a 12 kW range. But I am encouraging you, go Fast Trax Tube, watch my range videos. There's 2 parts to it. You're going to get a lot out of it. Look, Eric says that it's a great investment. To me, it's the best $100 you'll ever invest in your life. And you're probably thinking, wait a minute, it's $125. Not if you use coupon code 250FF, all capital letters. Use 25 off at checkout and you can get it for $100. Try it for a year. Okay. If you're in the Fast Trax Plus, you're going to get it already. Okay. If you're in the Fast Trax Black, you're not going to get it. But you can upgrade and go on and pay the $100. Use that coupon code. It's great videos, folks. I'm not here stumping stuff. I wouldn't sell you snake oil. There is definitely, you're going to learn something in there. And all the stuff that we've got coming, that we've been adding weekly, more and more. Got Ryan Jackson's entire series on changes to the 2023. For you that are in the 2023, worth the weight in gold to watch those series. Ryan Jackson is an amazing guy. Does an amazing job. Probably one of our top tier educators in the country. Ryan Jackson is, okay? Ryan probably forgot more than I'll ever know, but he is that kind of guy that you want to check out. Definitely is. And we've got his series in there. So go check it out. Now, so in our case, we don't fall under column A or B because we're over 8 3/4. Our range was 12, right? So we're going to be defaulting to column C. And notice it says you use column C. And it says, as long as it's not over 12 kW. Now, what happens if it was over 12? If it was like 13 kW or 14 kW or 15 kW, that's where these notes are going to come into play. Note 1 or note 2. Okay, well, I can tell you right now is if it's just one range, then you're going to have note 1 is the only one that's going to come into play for you. If it's just one range, okay? Now, here's something neat. It's not over 12, and ours is not. It's 12. Then for one cooking appliance, the demand factor is 8 kW, and that's it. 8,000 watts, 8,000 VA, 8 kW, 8 kVA. All means the same thing. But that's for that 12 kW range, we don't have to worry about the 12. We just use 8. So you're going to write 8 down. And that's because that's what the table allows us to do. Okay? All right. So this 8,000. So we're going to write that down. That's your range. Deathstroke. What a name. Will you be able to watch this later? Absolutely you will. It'll be available on all of our streaming channels. Feel free to watch it later. Absolutely it will be. Great question. All right, so the range is out of the way. We got the range taken care of. So what have we done? We've got the general use, general lighting. We've applied the demand factors. We went from a connected load to get our calculated load for that. We did our appliances. We did our clothes dryer. We did our range. Okay, let's move on. Let me get you back to our list and we'll keep working down this thing. Let's go back to our lesson. All right, so we knocked all that stuff out. Next thing we need to tackle, which is arguably to most people one of the hardest things, and it's really not, but people question, AC versus heat and all this kind of stuff. So let's look at our question. So in this example, we have electric heat, which is 2 banks of 3 kW heat banks that are built into the system, probably in line with the air handler. And then we have the air handler itself, which is blowing the air throughout the structure, okay? And then we have air conditioning compressor, and then we have a condensing fan, okay? Makes sense? Now, let's keep something in our mind here. What code section are we going to be utilizing now? This is going to be 220.60, but you're also possibly going to be dabbling 220.50 as well. The difference, 220.60 is talking about non-coincident loads. That means loads that aren't going to be running at the same time. And when you think of heat versus AC, when you have separate heating units and you have separate air conditioning units, then, the thought is they're going to be locked out, right? So they're not going to be running at the same time. If that's the case, they're thermostatically separated and that you can't have the heat on with the AC, then that's an example of a non-coincident load. Now, we're doing a dwelling, but in real life, if you're out on the job, you're a commercial electrician, industrial electrician, you work in a facility, and you're sizing loads, and you might have 2 big motors. If those motors are interlocked to a point where neither one of these motors or 2 pieces of equipment, because of service restrictions, load restrictions, maybe they can't operate at the same time. You have some kind of interlock that keeps them from running at the same time. That's another example of a non-coincident load. So you're able to take the larger of the 2, size it for the larger, then it doesn't matter if the smaller one runs because you already sized everything for the larger, so no harm, no foul, right? That's what we mean by non-coincident load. Now, when we're doing a dwelling and we try to, as an educator, we try to make it as simple as possible, and we're going to assume that this heat cannot be on at the same time as the air conditioning. So that's our non-coincident load. But I want to give you some caution. We're going to do ours, but I want to give you some caution. If I have central air and I have baseboard heat, then the baseboard heat you're going to have to take into the equation. Okay, there is no non-coincident load. Somebody could turn that baseboard heat or that heating units on while the AC is running. If you've got kids, right, you know it's going to happen. So that's important. And I just want to point that out. Not just because of our example, but people ask me about, well, what do you do with baseboard heat and all this? I just want to point this out in the code really quickly, okay, that where that talks about that, let me go back here so you can see what it's talking about here real quick. Right here, 220.51. It doesn't get talked about enough, but I'm just giving you tidbits of knowledge here, okay, is that fixed electric space heating loads shall be calculated at 100% of the total connected load. Connected load. So whatever the VA value is, or the wattage value, total connected load, you take it at 100%. Okay, so there you go. Just kind of making sure you understand how you would deal with it. So you still got your AC loads, but if you had like baseboard heat, you're taking that at 100%, and it's just going to be added to our load. Those are not non-coincident loads, just saying. Okay, just wanted to make sure that was clear, throw that out there, because there's always an element of some level of confusion there. All right, so we're in our question, we had AC and we had heat, and we're going to look at it. Relax. I just wanted to throw those extra tidbits of knowledge out there. So non-coincident load. And there's always that one person out there that doesn't like my teaching style. Appreciate you joining me. Good luck. There's other educators out there. Check out Mike Holt. He's a great educator. Check out Ryan Jackson. Maybe I'm not your cup of tea. That's fine. I never wanted to please everybody, and I'm not changing my style for anybody. So, yep, you're right. I don't take advice, and I don't take that kind of criticism. You don't like it? Go somewhere else. All right, so now 220.60. Non-coincident loads, here's what it says. Where it is unlikely that two or more non-coincident loads, and I described what those were, will be used simultaneously, it shall be permitted to use only the largest loads that will be used at one time for calculating the total load of a feeder in service. Makes sense, right? I just kind of described that and gave you an example of how that would take place. So in our example, we're going to say that our heat is a non-coincident load with our AC. And that's how we're going to work this equation. It's thermostatically locked out. One other question that people ask is, what about a heat pump? A heat pump is totally different. And when you do the heat pump, you're just going to take the everything from the heat pump, the possible heating loads and the air conditioning loads from the compressor, and you're going to add that to the equation because that is not a non-coincident load, okay? Typically, the heat comes on to, and again, it could come on. So at the end of the day, be careful when it comes to heat pump applications, right? So, all right, anyway, back to where we're at. So we have a non-coincident load. Now, remember what I said earlier, where a motor is part of the non-coincident load and is not the largest of the non-coincident loads, then you take 125% of the motor load shall be used in the calculation if it is the largest motor. So let me paint this picture for you. If I'm comparing the heat versus AC, let's say, in our example, and the heat was greater, typically it will be because it's like 6 kW, it's up there. If the heat is greater than the AC, yet the AC compressor happens to actually be the largest motor in this dwelling, then I'm going to take that air conditioning compressor, that motor, hermetic refrigerant motor, I'm going to take that value at 125% plus the sum of the air handler plus the sum of the condenser motor, and I'm going to add that all up, and now I'm going to compare that to the heat again. If the heat is still greater than the AC after I took the air conditioning compressor at 125%, if the heat is still greater, then you get rid of the AC and you go with the heat, and that's your largest value, and you run with it. You with me? Now, if you did that for the heat and you got rid of the AC, then guess what you've done? You've also got rid of the largest motor in the dwelling when you cast that all out. So remember 220.50 I mentioned when we started this? That's just another step. That's going to reference you to 430.24, whereas if you take the largest motor at 125% and the sum of all the other motors. Well, we have already taken the sum of these other motors. We took the garbage disposer. We've already done that. So since the air conditioning compressor is out of the equation now because the heat was greater, I got to go hunting for the next largest motor. And in our case, that would be the garbage disposer. That was the next largest pure motor, okay? So keep that in mind as we're moving through these steps. But that's just keep that in mind. That's what we're going to have to do. I kind of blew it and told you what we're going to do, but just keep that in mind. All right, so now let's go on and do the math. Let's look at our loads and see if we can't work this out and see which one we're going to use. Okay. So let's kind of see what we got to do. And Mike, I'm going to need you to help me here. Get you to go look again for me. So you know what I'm going to ask you to do already. So, all right. So we already know what the heat is. This is 6,000 kW. But remember, we have to add this blower motor to this heat. Why? Because that's also going to blow around the heat. Okay. So that blower motor is not a non-coincident load. Okay. Michael's already worked it out for me, the whole thing. He was just sitting back ready to work this thing out. I know how Michael thinks he is. He said, I was already ahead of you. So remember, that air handler has to count, right? Both in the heat equation and in the air conditioning, because that is not a non-coincident load. That air handler will be working whether the heat's going or not, all right? Jacob, thank you very much for subscribing to the channel. All right. All right, so Michael's already kind of done the math for us, but we'll kind of look at what we've got here. So it's 6 kW for the heat, and then the air handler, which is a 1/4 horsepower, is 5.8 amps, okay? So, I think Swartzy has it as 5.8 VA, but I think he means just amps. So it's 5.8, yep. And we'll do 5.8. Now, I'm not going to check you. If you went to the tables, I'm going to take your word for it. Okay? I'm going to listen to you. All right. And so 5.8 times, remember how we get VA? We do 5.8 times 115, and that is 667 VA. Okay. So I'm going to write that down just so I don't forget, 667 VA. So that's the air handler. So our heat total is what? 6,667. That's our heat. So that's what we're comparing the AC to. So 6,667 VA. All right, now let's look at the AC. All right, so this AC, we already know what the air handler is, so we know what that one is. The next is the air conditioning compressor. That's 5 horsepower. Okay. Now, at 5 horsepower, and I don't think Schwartzy went and did that one. So what's the 5 horsepower? Okay, so Swartzy, I'll do this so we can show people how they do this again. We go back to the code, and we're going to go down, and we're going to define the horsepower. We're going to 430. We're going to go to the tables. Y'all all know how we do this. And we're doing single phase, so it's 430.248. So we're going to go here. And this is how Swartzy did it. This is how we all do it, right? And he didn't listen, so he gives me the amps. Just kidding, Swartz. All right, so here's the 230. And you come down here to 5 horsepower right here. Well, my screen's not going to let you go down that far, unfortunately. Let me see if I can temporarily do that over here. Hold on. There we go, temporarily. Here's our 5 horsepower right here. And you come over here, and that's where you get the 28 amps. So that's where you get the FLC. So that's where Swartzy got the FLC. All right, let me move this back down real quick, folks. Okay. All right, makes sense? All right, so what do we do? Once we know the amps, the FLC, what do? We take that 28 times 230. And that gives me 6,440 VA. Okay, so that's 6,440. Uh-oh, wait a minute. That heat's in question now, buddy. Okay. And then we still have one more to do. And that was that condensing fan. And that was, what is that? 1/6 horsepower. And I think Swartzy did that one for us already. And the 6 horsepower is 4.4 amps. Times 115 volts. Again, that's how we figure out what the VA is. We got to know the amps, and we have the amps, and we use the volts, and that's how we calculate it out. So that'd be 4.4 times 115, and that is 506 VA. So I'm writing that down. All right, hey. So now for the AC, all we're doing is adding those 3 up. We're going to add 667. That was the air handler. Plus 6,440. That was for the air compressor unit, air conditioning unit. Double check me, Michael, and make sure that is 6,440. And then we're going to do 506 to that. That gives me 7,613. Okay? 7,613 is what we'll be looking at here. Okay? All right, so folks, think about this for a second, okay? What do we have? Okay, well, what we have, get rid of the screen real quick so I can see what I'm doing. We have another value that compare to the heat. Now, We don't even have to do the AC unit at 125% because AC is already larger than the heat. So we're going to take the AC, we're getting rid of the heat. So our next value that we're going to write down is 7,613. Okay? Now, if you wanted to take the air conditioning unit at 100, because it is the largest motor, and since we are using the AC, it's still in play, then you could have taken the AC at 125% in the sum of the others, and then you would have already taken care of that 25% that's covered in 220.50. It would have been already taken care of because you only need to take one motor to get that extra 25%. We're not going to do that. We're just going to take that 7,613 for the AC. We got rid of the heat. And then we're moving on to the last step. That last step is 220.50. We need to account for the largest motor. Now, there's a lot of people that would want the code to physically say that. And so they really struggle with this part of it. But I'm going to show you why the code actually does say that. So we'll go back up here for the naysayers. We'll go back up here. Let me get the 220 again real quick. And we'll get up to 220. And then we're doing exam prep. So that's why we're doing the standard method, by the way. So for anybody that's asking, the optional method is so much easier, but we're doing the standard method here. All right, so let me get back up here where I'm at. And we're going to find out where the heck I was at. Where was that at? In 220.50. Bear with me, I can't see squat. Okay. So this is what we're talking about for the motor. It says motor loads, and we're talking air conditioning units. That's why it says 440 right here. Okay. So a hermetic refrigerant motor is engulfed in this 220.50 as well. It says motors shall be calculated in accordance with 430.24, 430.25, 430.26, and 440.6. 440.6 reminds us that we're going to take that at 125%. Well, we took everything at 100%. But we need to take the largest motor at 125%. Well, we've already got it at 100, so all we're trying to do is get that little 25%. That's it. So in our case, since we did have the motor and we used the motor, that means it's still in play. So guess what the largest motor in our dwelling is still? It's that air conditioning unit. It's the largest motor. So I'm going to take that 6,440, which was that 28 times 230. I'm going to take that times 25%. That is 1,610. And that's the only value I want. I only want that 25% in order to appease 220.50. That's it. Now, when students do this unit 8 and they submit this and their numbers aren't right, it's usually because they left out the 25% of the largest motor. And in our case, since the air conditioning is in play, it was the larger against heat, then that air conditioning unit is the largest motor. Okay, so we add that to it. So I'm going to add this 1,610 to our equation. All right. So now what do? Hey, guess what? We're done. We now have to do some math. So now let me add up all these loads. Okay. And you can do it with me. I'll call it out as I add them up. Okay. So we've got, let's see here, 6,150. Okay. Remember, that's the general use and general lighting loads. We got 6,328 for the appliances. So 6,328 plus. And then we got, let's see, the clothes dryer was 5,000. So we're adding 5,000 to this. Plus the range was 8,000. So we add 8,000 to that. Plus the air conditioning load was 7,613. Plus the 25% of the largest motor. Only one motor, folks. That is 1,610. What's that total? 34,701 VA. Now, what do you do with it? It's simple, folks. Remember, this was a 122.40 volt. So all we're going to do is divide it by 240. So we take that 34,701. We're going to divide that by 240. That equals 144.5. Now, remember what we said, rounding? We're now working in amps. Now we're working in amps. So 220.5B, we can now round. So 144.5, 0.5 or greater, we're going to round this up to 145. So that is the answer to the first part of our question. So let's go down here in our question. And right here. So right here in this one, what is the minimum ampere rating for this service? So the minimum is 145 amps. Oops, sorry. 145 amps, right? So we've already done all this math. So the next one it says, so what is the minimum size service? Okay, so when you're thinking of your service, it's based on the rating of the overcurrent device. Well, where we go in the code to see if there's a device that's rated for 145? Our load calc tells us everything is 145. That is our minimum amps that we have to have. But that's different than the service size. Where do we go for that? 240.6A. That's the standard breakers. So we're going to go to that in the code. I got to tell you, I've been doing this for over 32 years. If anybody thinks that I just do this for the money, you're crazy. I love it. I love being the electrician. Obviously, I know single phase, three phase, know how to do circuits, 3 ways, 4 ways, single pole, switch leg. I know phantom voltage. I know how to teach people how to run circuits. I've wired hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes in commercial buildings. I get it. I can watch people do videos on 3-point saddles, 4-point saddles, conduit bends. Great. As an electrician, you learn that stuff. I know how to use a bend field bender. I had to learn that when I was in school doing my training. People do really pretty work and it looks really great and all that stuff. But you know where the real skill is in being an electrician? Right here. Knowing why you do what you do. That's the real skill. And that's what the code is all about. So please, anybody out there that thinks, I don't need to learn code, it's just part of your progression. It's part of being a knowledgeable electrician. Get into the code. Become that specialist, that go-to person. Michael is that go-to person in his company, right? So, just be that person. So anyway, it's an immense set of pride that you get when you really know how to maneuver that code book. It really is. Okay, anyway, so let's look at it right here. So now the question is, and I'll blow this up here, do I have anything that's rated for 145? Because that's what our calculation came out to be. The answer to this is absolutely not. There isn't. So what rule lets me go to the next standard size? Well, that would be 240.4, and it allows me to go to the next standard size. So we'll go look at it just because that's what we're doing. So 240.4 plus we're kind of already there, so it makes sense. So in this case, overcurrent protection rated 800 amps or less. Obviously ours is, it's only 145. And we also noticed that they didn't have a breaker rated at 145. So this rule says that I can go to the next higher standard size device above the ampacity of the conductors being protected. So I'm able to say, well, I want to go up to 150. So that's our answer. That is your service rating. It's the next size over the 145. Okay, so go back to the lesson. Oh, by the way. You have to meet these 3 rules. And obviously, in our case, we're going to meet these rules. The first part of it has nothing to do with cord and plug, portable, and receptacles. So obviously, no brainer. The next one just reminds you if it doesn't correspond that you can go to the next standard size. And the third one says, as long as it's not over 800 amps, you're good to go to the next available standard size. Okay? Do they make breakers that are non-standard size? Absolutely. If you were to find a 145, it doesn't have to be the standard. You could use a 145. If you have a manufacturer that makes one, go for it. But this rule allows me to go to the next standard size. And I'm telling you, you're going to pay less for a standard size than you would a non-standard size. Okay. All right. So that's what we've got there. So we met all those rules. And as I told you here in the table, as you can see right here, they don't make a 145. So that's what allows us to go up to a 150. So back to our lesson. Right here is 150. Oh, and by the way, these over here, code references, you know what I tell you. If you leave a code reference blank, I will mark it wrong. But when it comes to a calculation like this, I don't tend to mark it wrong because, again, this is a calc, and I don't really need a code reference. And I'll also remind you that since this breaks it into a whole different segment, it doesn't actually say NEC reference above it here, so I'm not going to harp on you. But if you want to be extracurricular, you want to be that kind of that extra level, then you could have put 240.6 A right here. All right, 6A. Can't see my keyboard. All right, you could have put that all here. So again, you could put 240.4. You want to super impress me? You know, there you go. Put it all there if you want. But it's not necessary for these calculations. Up here, every answer needs an NEC reference or I'm going to mark it wrong. I don't even care if you get the answer right. I'm still going to mark it wrong. You have to support it with an NEC reference. Now, your reference might be wrong and your answer's right. I'm not going to count your reference against you because you still got the right answer. But I at least want you to try. That's what you paid for this course for, right? This is a learning course. So give it a shot. Try to give the reference. All right, so anyway, here is our amp. So our service is 150 amp rated service. So that answers that question, okay? Next question says, what is the minimum size THWN copper conductor that can be installed at this for these ungrounded conductors? Okay, well, it's already, we know that we did the load calc. It's 145 amperes. What do we know about this equation real quick, folks? What do we know? First thing we know is that this is a 12240 volt 3-wire service. We saw that at the beginning. We know that it's over 100, but it's not over 400, right? We know this. Why am I saying all this? Because there's an allowance in 310.12 that can be applied here. And so people ask me all the time, when can I apply the 83% rule? The answer to that is you want to apply it 100% of the time, even on an exam, where it falls within the realm that 310.12 is applicable. Means that you can actually apply it, okay? Now, in the real world, if you want to size it 100%, you want to go to table 310.16 and size based on this, then go for it. You can do that. But I'm trying to express to you that on exams, that 310.12, or if you're in the 2017 code, is 310.15b7 for those that are in the 2017. It's not an exception. It's an it's permissive. Means you can do it. Okay, it reminds me of a show. You can do it. But anyway, so let's go back to the code and look at 310.12. All right, get my mouse working for me today here. And 310.12. And I am quite shocked that we still have 26 people with us. So I appreciate you. Dedication, I guess, is what we'd call it. All right, so 310.12. Notice that is not an exception. It's not, and this was new for the 2020 in 310.12. It's broken down into services and feeders and this type of thing, grounded conductor. And this is just permits the grounded conductor to be actually smaller than the ungrounded hot conductors. And that's typically what you're going to get when you get an SC cable. The helical neutral is going to be up to 2 sizes smaller than the ungrounded hot conductors. And that's already done by the manufacturer because generally in a 1 and 2 family, there's enough diversity and balancing out of the system that you're not going to have an overwhelming amount of load on the neutral. Okay. So now people ask, can you use 310.12 to size the neutral? Absolutely. If you want to make it the same size as the 83%, you can, but typically you're only going to have to size your neutral. Can't be smaller than that in 250.102C1. So it can't be smaller than what's in that table, but you can do the load calc using the standard method, and at that point, size your neutral based on that, if you know, that type of thing. All right, so our case right here, it's a 1-family dwelling, and it is single phase 122/40 system, so everything's checking our boxes. Looks good. Down to services. It says for a service rated 100 amperes through 400, check. The service conductor supplied the entire load associated with that dwelling, check. Just one panel. Everything's being supplied. All the branch circuits come out of that one panel, supplying everything. So we meet that check mark. We're good to go. It says it shall be permitted to have the ampacity not less than 83% of the service rating. So in our case, our service rating was what? 150 amps. That's the breaker. That's how you determine your service rating. It's the breaker rating. And we picked a 150. Okay? So what we're going to do here is we take that 150 and we multiply that by 83%. And that is 124.5. Okay, 124.5 amps. So let's do that again just to be sure. 150 times 83% is 124.5 amps. So now don't be the buzzkill out there and tell me to go to the little table here. I want you to see how you really do it without having to cheat and use a table. Okay, at least that table. So now you're going to go to 310/16 ampacity. Now we're over 100 amps, right? And we're using THWN, right? So we're in the 75-degree column, right? So we're going to go to 310/16, the table. And we're going to go there. I'm going to pop that up on the screen, at least how much of it. So we're right here under the 75 due to the 110.14 C1 and C1 and C2 limitations, I guess. Yes, C1, C1A, and then there's C2. I can't remember. Anyway, it's the 75%. So that's where we're going to be. Plus it's THWN, so we know we're right here. Okay. So we're here. Now we need something that's at least 124.5 amps. So let's kind of go down here. And okay, so it looks like, and we're doing copper unless stated otherwise. Okay. And I do see Death. I see your question. I will address it here in a second. So 130 amps, obviously that can handle 124.5, and that is a 1 gauge. Okay. So the size of this would be a 1 gauge. Okay. Now, what you just saw is how to do this using 310/16. Now, in 310.12, if you don't have any adjustment or corrections, okay, you don't have any ambient temperature issues to worry about or anything like that, then you can just go, or you don't have any, it's 30 degrees Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't have to deviate from the ampacities in 310/16, then you can go right to this table. And for a 150 right here, it tells you a 1 copper, just like what we just looked up. So all this table is based on 83%. Now, remember something. This table is absolutely, really no good at all if there's an adjustment or correction. And that's what this note down here is about. And this came about because I submitted something a couple cycles ago to make this very clear, that if you still have to do an adjustment or correction, then you better know how to use the table, because you're going to have to do some calculating in order to be able to figure and make sure that after adjustment and corrections, you still have a conductor that's not less than 83%. And then you still can use 310.12. You can still use it. You just don't get to use this table. You have to use the 83% pure, okay? I'm not going to explain that because that's not germane to our question. But if you want to know how to do that, I'm going to do another shameless plug. We have a video that's available called Derating Demystified that's over in Fast Trax Tube. It, again, is the best $100 you're ever going to invest. And I promise you something. And if you go there, you're going to say, why? It's 125. Well, use our coupon code 25OFF. And you're going to get it for $100. We have a video in there called Derating Demystified. Search for it in the search bar. And you're going to learn some stuff about adjustments and corrections and everything involved in that. Obviously, I don't have time to do that here on a Wednesday night, and I've already gone grossly over my time. And that's because I'm very long-winded. I'm sure that's some of the comments I'll get from the haters, but it is what it is. So there you go. So I prefer you learn how to do this by simply understanding what the 83% is, as it states right here. This also applies to feeders, applications. For example, you could have a service outside with a meter, then it hits an emergency disconnect outside, and maybe that emergency disconnect's also your service disconnect. And now it's just a switch. And now you have a feeder that's going to a remote distribution panel, a sub panel, we like to call it, somewhere else in the building. If all of the circuits are still coming out of that remote distribution panel, then that feeder is seeing 100% of all the loads. You could still apply the 83% rule, okay? So it's kind of one of those things. It's a beautiful thing to be able to apply it. Now, do you have to apply it? No. You want to full size everything, go for it, okay? All right, so in our case, go back to our lesson really quickly. And I want to finish this one out. So this is a 1 AWG copper, and I always assume copper unless stated otherwise. Code references 310.16, and of course 310.12 with some references there. And then lastly, it says, what is the minimum size grounding electrode conductor? All right. What's important about this is what we haven't done is stipulated what type of electrode. If we don't tell you the type of electrode, ground rods, ground rings, pipe, plate, we don't tell you that it's a concrete encased electrode. If we don't tell you what it is, then you immediately go to table 250.66, flat out, okay? If we tell you it's a ground rod, or ground rods, because you have to supplement a single ground rod unless you can prove it's 25 ohms or less, then you're going to go to 250.66A, okay, for a rod, pipe, or plate. If it's a concrete encased electrode, referred to as a UFER, then you're going to go straight to 250.66B. If it's a ground ring, you're going to go to 250.66C. If I don't tell you, I tell you it's a water pipe, in-ground, encased steel, like I-beam steel in ground in the earth. If I tell you that it's a metal tank or something like that, then you always are going to go to the table, always. And if I never tell you the type of electrode it is, always go to the table, okay? So in our case, our size, and it's always based on the size of the conductors. So I told you that it's a 1 gauge. That's the size that's going to be for our service, 1 gauge. All right, it's the minimum 83%. Now we're going to go and we're going to see how to size the grounding electrode conductor. So here we are. So now we're going to finish this thing out. We're going to go in 250. All right. And in 250, oops, not 250.50, excuse me, 250.66 right here. Here's your table. Y'all are familiar with this table. By the way, the 3 most important tables to remember in 250 and commit to memory is 250.66 for grounding electrode conductors, 250.122 for equipment grounding conductors, which are different. They're sized based on the overcurrent device that's ahead of the circuit. And then, of course, 250.102C, which talks about the minimum size for a grounded conductor. Of course, you still got to handle the load that you calculate for the grounded conductor, but it can't be less than that on that table. Supply side bonding jumpers, system bonding jumpers, all of that is going to be using 250.102C. So you got to make sure you go there, whether it's single or parallel applications. So again, supply side bonding jumpers and all that stuff is going to use that table. Those are the three most important tables in 250 to remember, okay? And they're distinctly different, okay? So try to remember that. All right, so here we have 1 gauge right here, and you come over, it's copper unless stated otherwise, and it's going to be a 6 copper, okay? So there you go. So to answer that question, back to the lesson, we're going to put 250.66. Oh, and it's a table, so we're going to, I'm surprised nobody said that. We're going to put T for table, and it's going to be a 6 AWG. You can put the aluminum too if you want. Oops, that's not good. But again, we always consider copper unless stated otherwise, so all I'm really looking for is the copper. But if you want to give both, go for it. All right, so that's your answers. That's simple, straightforward. Now let's do the optional real quick. We've already done all the math, okay? But we have to remember that doing the optional method, we got to do a little different steps. And I want to show you the difference in the two. Same values, okay? Same values. But we're going to use the optional method. Optional method's much easier, okay? Much easier to figure out. All right, so let's do this. So what is the minimum amps for the service using the optional method? Okay, so now let's go back to 220. And I know this is a long episode tonight. I could say that I'm sorry, but I would be lying. I'm not sorry. It just is what it is. So, okay, so here we are. We're at the optional method, okay? So here's what we're going to be working at. Okay, so we're talking about a dwelling unit. So we're at 220.82. This is the optional method, okay? Now you'll notice it says optional, oh, y'all can't even see that, sorry. Notice here it is part 4, and it says the optional feeder and service load calculation shall be permitted, okay? Mine is focused. It's going to be your connection, Jesse. Mine can't not be focused because all I'm doing is streaming my screen. If anybody out there, if it's not focused, it's because of your speed, your connection, your download, and it's probably going to be, it might be blurry, but I can't make it any bigger. I'm sorry. It would get lost if I made it any bigger. I can try to do this a little bit better. Thanks. Okay. So, all right. So that might be a little bit better, but again, I can't control the blurriness. I wish I could, but I can't. I'm purely streaming up the value, so it's impossible for it to be blurred on my end, that type of thing. Plus, anything that I look at is blurry anyway, because I can't see squat. All right, so here we are. Dwelling unit. Remember, general. Optional feeder, again, you're permitted to use part 5. If you want to do part 3 in standard method like we just did, go for it. Okay, go for it. But in this scenario, we're going to do it the optional. All right, so using the optional, we says this section applies to dwelling units that have a total connected load served by a single 120 240 volt or to a Y120 volt set of 3-wire service or feeder conductors with an ampacity of 100 amperes or greater. So our anticipation is this going to be 100 amperes or greater? Obviously, for the standard method, it was. So we need to see whether or not this is going to be 100 amps or greater. So we got to do the math to do it, okay? And it tells me that we have the permission to do this calculation instead of the method specified in part 3. So in the real world, we're probably always going to use the optional method, okay? On an exam, you best know how to do the standard method, just saying. All right, and it also reminds us, folks, that the feeder and service conductors whose calculated load is determined by the optional method shall be permitted to have the neutral load determined by 220.61. Remember, 220.61 is under the standard method. So that kind of is why it tells you, it says, okay, well, when you're going to size the neutral, then you're going to have to use the standard method, okay? And here's a little spoiler alert. Next week, we're going to do the standard method for these, okay? All right, so let's kind of do the math. All right, first things first, let's talk about the general load. So this one's where it gets easy. The general calculated load shall be not less than 100% for the first 10,000 plus 40% for the remaining following loads. Okay, so the first 10,000 is a given. Everything over that for these loads here, okay, not the heating air conditioning, but for these loads here, anything over 10 kVA is going to be at 40%. So that's a huge demand factor to remember, okay? All right, so right here, we get the same language. And remember, we've already done this. We've already done the 3 VA per our square foot. Remember, it's 2,500 square foot. Let's see, what was our VA for that? Remember, it was 7,500 square feet because it was 2,500 square feet times 3 VA. We already did that. So that we already have. See, here's what's so neat about the optional. You've already done it. All right, and the next, 1,500 for the small appliances. Well, we had 2 of them minimum. We've already done that. That was 3,000. And of course, for the laundry, also 1,500 for that. We've already done that. So remember what that was? 7,500, 3,000, and 1,500. That was 12,000. We've taken that value. We don't use that table 220, that 42 now. We don't need that anymore. That was standard. We're taking these full values. All right. Now, we've got that. So all you're going to do is write that down. So I'm going to write that 12,000 down. That encompasses all of our square footage. That encompasses our minimum of 2 small appliances. And that covers our laundry. Done for that. Next, nameplate ratings. So what we're going to do is simply add them up, folks. So in here, you're just going to take the nameplate. So remember that range? We're going to take that nameplate. Remember that dryer that was 4 kW and we bumped it up to 5? No, sir. We're going to take that at 4 kW. We're going to take everything at its face value. All right. So let's kind of go through these. All right. So all of the appliances that are fastened in place. So what do we got? Let's go back to the lesson really quickly. And we're going to add it to our 12,000. So here's our lesson. And Jesse, I can't blow this up any bigger because it'll cause my numbers to get all distorted. So remember what we've got. So let's add them up. So I've got a water heater. So that's 4,000. I'm going to write that down. I've got the dishwasher, 1,500. I'm going to write that down. I've got the in-sink waste disposer. I think that was 828. I'm going to write that down. Okay, so I've got all 3 of those. Okay. So we've got all of our, everything, added up together. All right. See, what else do we got? Okay, so let's kind of go back to the code real quick. See what else it says we got. We got all our appliances. Okay. Next, we need to do what? All right, now we got to get the range. So what was the range? Well, the range was 8,000, remember? So I'm just going to write 8,000 down. Remember, you're just writing down nameplates now, folks. Next, it says clothes dryer that's not connected to the laundry circuit. Okay, so again, it wouldn't be 30 amp. Okay, laundry circuit's typically 20 amp, so 30 amp. In our case, we did, and we take the face value. What was the clothes dryer? It was 4,000. Remember, nameplate now. We're doing optional. Nameplate, 4,000. What else do we have? We already got the dishwasher. We got 828. We've got the range. Oh, we didn't add the range. The range was what? 12,000. Now, under standard method, we got to drop it down to 8, right? But this is the nameplate because this is optional. So we're going to take that 12. We add that 12,000. Okay. All right. So we're going to take that, and now we're going to add all of these up. We're going to do our 7,500, our 3,000, our 1,500. We're going to add all the other values up. So with me, okay? Yep, the range was 12,000. All right, so I'm going to go 7,500. That was the 3 VA per square foot times 2,500. The 2 small appliances at 1,500 each, so that's 3,000. I'm going to take the 1,500 for the laundry. Okay, so we're at 12,000. Now we're going to add all of the appliances. We're going to do the water heater at 4,000. We're going to do the dishwasher at 1,500. We're going to play the clothes dryer at 4,000. We're going to use the range at 12,000. And we're going to use the disposer at 828. All right. So that should give me 34,328 VA. Okay. So let's write that down. 34,328. Now, what did it say that we can do to that, folks? The first 10,000 of that value at 100%. So we know we're going to start out with at least 10,000. The remainder over that, we get a hefty demand of 40%. Okay. So let's take that 34,328. Let's take 10,000 away from that. That gives us 24,328. Multiply that by 40%. That is 9,731.2. Drop the 0.2. And what do we have? We're going to have 9,731. Okay. That's what we're working with. All right. Now, if you want to leave 97.31.2, it's not going to affect your equation. It's not going to make a difference. Okay. Not going to hurt anything. All right. So what do we have to do now? We got to add back something. We got to add back that 10. So we're going to add 10,000 back to it. That was the first 10,000 at 100%. That gives me 19,731.2. And so I'm just going to take 19,731. Remember what I said earlier. When I'm asking you a question on an exam that's KW, you don't round. Now that we're working into values that are VA, you can round now or you can round later. Okay? Ultimately, you're going to be rounding when you get down to amps. When I'm asking you a specific question and it's only a one-word question and it's about KW, I want KW. Don't round it because I want to differentiate when amps gets rounded. Okay? In this case right here, there's a reason why I ask you for KW and not VA on a lot of those single questions on our Fast Trax. Because I'm trying to point out that when it's KW, you can't use the rounding. Okay? All right. Anyway, little subtle things that should help you with your unit reviews and things like that. But when you're doing a full load calculation like this, the VA is amps, it's volt amps, and you can do the rounding, it's perfectly fine. So either way, it's not going to change your equation at the end, but so 19,731, okay? All right, so now that's the first part. That's part A, right? Come back to the code, you see that? That is this part right here. All of this right here, okay? We've already figured the water heater in. We got the clothes dryer. We did the ranges. We did all the fixed appliances. Okay. Now, if you have any other motors that aren't covered up here, then this is where you're going to, this is where you're going to add that. And you're simply going to take their nameplate and add it to it. Again, you're not going to escape it. If you have some other motor in the dwelling, you need to account for it. It doesn't just disappear. Okay. So that's the thing about item number 4 is that you may have some other load that you have to account for that may not be picked up in 3 up here. So that's why you would use 4. Okay. All right. So that's done. So 34,328 is our top portion. Now, heat versus AC. So this is where it gets a little different because this really has nothing to do with a non-coincident load when you're using the optional method. You simply look at the heat and you look at the AC and you compare the two, right? And see which one is greater. Okay, so in this case right here, it says, number 1, it says 100% of the nameplate rating of the air conditioning and cooling. Well, you remember what we did? We already did this earlier. And we don't have to worry about that 125%, folks. Okay? We don't have to worry. That's kind of funny, isn't it? When you're doing the standard method, you got to capture that additional 25%. Isn't that weird? But when you do the optional method, you get to say, I don't care about that extra 25%. And the optional method is always going to be smaller anyway. That 25% and that little thing that's in the standard method for non-coincident loads where you're comparing them and all that, and then you have to take the largest motor, that is so stupid. because you don't have to do anything like that in the optional method. And in the real world, everybody's going to be using the optional method anyway. But why do you still, as an electrician, need to know how to use the standard method? Because of neutral calculations. So you still need to know how to do it, okay? But anyway. Okay, so anyway, we got it down here. So let's look and see what we got. So for us, we already did that. Remember, if you took notes, and I know Schwartzy took notes, the air conditioning previously was 7,613. And the heat, we already did the heat earlier. And that was 6,667, right? So this is a no-brainer for us. We already know that item number 1 is going to win because we had already done our calculation, okay? Now, if you hadn't done the calculation, then all you're going to do is do just like what we did before. You're going to take the VAs when you calculate it out from the air handler, the condenser, and the compressor and come up with that VA. And then the heat, just know it was 6,000 plus the air handler was 667. You add them together. So you're going to still add those loads together and compare. And whichever is larger, okay? Now, here's where it gets interesting, though, for an optional method. Whereas the standard method is purely the heat versus AC. It really doesn't care so much about air handlers. In other words, you can take the heat and you can take the air conditioning values, whichever, and you don't compare the two. When it comes to the optional method, this is where you start seeing language like heat pump. So if you happen to get a question and you run into this in the field and you're doing the optional method, because I know you will be, and it's a heat pump. So a heat pump, you take 100% of the nameplate rating on that heat pump when the heat pump is used without any supplemental electric heat. So if there's no other supplemental heating, maybe you're in a certain part of the country where they don't have supplemental heat. I'm in Texas, and I can tell you I have a heat pump, but I still have supplemental heat. We have a certain handful of days in the winter that get cold. And heat pumps are only good down to a certain temperature, like 30 degrees, something like that. I'm not an HVAC guy. But once it gets below something, it's typically not very efficient. So that's why we have supplemental heat, okay? If you're looking at a heat pump, then all you got to do is take the nameplate rating off of the heat pump and work it that way and add that to your calculation. Now, what if you do have supplemental heat? Okay, well, you take 100% of the nameplate rating of the heat pump, that's going to be on the label, on the nameplate, and you're going to take 65% of the supplemental heat for central electric space heating systems. So you might have a heat pump, but it has a separate central heating module, if you will. And if that's the case, and you could have said that's what ours was when we did the standard method. You could have said, isn't that heat, that 6,000, isn't that essential heat? Yes, but we don't have a real value for equating a heat pump when we're doing the standard. You just take the AC and then you take that supplemental heat and you compare, okay? In this case, this is the first time you actually see them call out with us, in our case, the second time, you see them calling out a heat pump. Now, you're going to just take 100% of whatever the nameplate is of the heat pump compressor, and then 65% of whatever the central space heating is, whatever that value would be. And in our case, it would be whatever that value is, you're going to take that at 65%. Okay? Now, check this out. If the heat pump compressor is prevented from operating at the same time that the supplemental heat is, and it may be, right? Because you got to remember that supplemental heat is not what happens when you're trying to defrost the coils. Okay, that's just a reversal of how the heat pump works. And it attempts to kind of go and do the opposite of cooling. It goes into heating, and then the refrigerant starts going in opposite directions. And it works oppositely. And again, I am not an HVAC guy, okay? But that has nothing to do with supplemental heat. Okay, that is your heat strip or central heat module. Now, if your heat pump can operate and it won't operate at the same time as your central heat strips, then guess what? If that's the case, then if the heat pump compressor is prevented from operating at the same time as the supplemental heat, then it does not need to be added to the supplemental heat for the central heat pump load, okay? So if that's the case, if that heat pump cannot be on at the same time, then I do not need to worry about that heat pump compressor. I just worry about the supplemental heat, okay? And of course, you have these other ones here, 65% of the nameplate rating for electric space heating, like baseboard heating, for example. If less than 4 separately controlled units. And then, of course, you have a multiplier of 40% for the nameplate rating of electric space heating for 4 or more separately controlled units. By the way, this could be baseboard heating, but you also could have separate heating units in your central heating component. And if that's the case, they're all going to be separately controlled through one thermostat. And if that's the case, then you could apply these percentages to that as well, okay? In our case, it was, totally futile because our AC was larger than the heat anyway. So we were going with the AC. And then, of course, this last one down here is the electric thermal storage and heating system. That's where the system goes out underground, comes back in, that type of thing. There's a nameplate rating on that. If that's what you have, then you would take that. If that's greater than the AC, then you go with that. So the easiest way to remember this is in ours, the AC was the largest. So all we're going to do is we're going to take that 34,000. What did we have before? Hold on here. I can't remember what we had. We had our, what was our total value? Can't remember. So we had, what did we have? Let me go back and see what we had. We had, I think total was 34,328. We took 10,000 away from that. That equals, 34,328 minus 10,000 equals 24,328 times 40%. That was 9,731. And we added 10,000 back to it. That gave us 19,731. You remember? Okay, that was our first part. So we got that. Now, what are we adding to it? The second part, the AC. So we're going to add that 19,731 and we're going to add 7,613 to that. Add those two together. See how that is? It's just two parts, folks. Just two easy parts in doing the optional method. So it's 19,731 plus 7,613. That gives me a total of 27,344. Okay. Now, what are we going to do with that? We're going to divide that by what? We're going to divide that by 240. Divide it by 240. 113.9 amps. And remember, we're working in amps now, so I'm able to round up to 114. So even if I have taken the full VA earlier and didn't round it out, it still would have ultimately been rounded up into 114. So it wouldn't have made a difference. Okay, so 114, that is what our value is. So on our question, okay, we want to look at our question real quick. And this is the one, believe it or not, folks get wrong the most when it comes to doing this calc. Let's go back to our lesson. Is right here. This one is going to be 114 amps. And from this point, it's just like it was on all the other ones. Okay, 114 amps. Now, does 114 amps correspond to an overcurrent device in 240.6a? No, it doesn't. So what do we get to do? We get to go to the next standard size. We don't have to go through that exercise again, 240.4b. We know that that's the case. If you go to 240.6a, you'll say, well, what's the next standard size over 114? Well, it should be a 125. Okay, let's go and double check that. I'll go back here and double check. And let's see, 240.6a. Get my clicker going here. Here we go. And here's our table. And let's see here. We got 114. Oh, we just missed it. 125. So that's the rating of our service. We know the minimum amps we need to handle the load. that we calculated. We know at that point, we know the minimum rating of the service. So we'll go back to the lesson here. And we'll do 125 amps. Okay. All right. Now, what is the minimum size THW? Oops. Sorry, I don't know why that keeps doing that. Minimum size THW conductor, just like the other one we did. Now, the question here that people ask, can we use 310.12? Absolutely. 310.12 is not just for the standard. It works perfectly fine for the optional method as well. No harm and no foul. Okay, so we're going to go 310.12. And we're going to look at it again. You go down here, scroll through it. 310.12.